Hello everyone, I'm Rafael Solorio. I'm a music producer and mixing engineer. I work primarily with rock and metal bands, and I'm very happy to present to you my first ever drum sample pack. This is Hybrid Metal Drums Volume 1. So I want to give you an example and do a little bit of a deep dive on all of these samples. You will find the links on the description. If you want to acquire this sample library, there will be a free mini pack which you can start to use right now and see if you like the samples, and if you do, which hopefully you will, you can go and get the full thing. So all links in the description, but right now what I want to do is give you a quick demo on how these samples sound. So first of all, I have some live drums in here with no processing, so we'll be switching back and forth between the live drums and then those same live drums, all the shells replaced with my samples. By the way, these are TCI samples for Slate triggers, so you do need Slate trigger in order to use these samples. There's also one shots which you can use on any library, on any sampler, on any DAW, but to get the best results and the most advantages from this sample library, you need Slate triggers. So first, live drums without any samples. And now we can listen to those samples. Okay, so we can listen to that last feel again with just the live drums. And now those shells replaced with my samples. Okay, so pretty big difference. So first of all, I want to talk to you about the content of the samples. Let's go to trigger. So what I've done is I've sampled my personal studio kit, which is a Pearl reference kit, very super nice sounding kit, and a Ludwig Superphonic snare. So we have a 22-inch kick drum, there's raw versions of the samples, there's processed versions of the samples, there's one shots, and there's presets as starting points so that you can start to get amazing sounds right away. And the same sort of architecture is applied to the snare samples and the tom samples. So kick drum has been sampled with many different microphones. I'm going to show you the raw versions of these microphones. We've got a Beta 91, D6, E602, Beta 52. We got a kick out, overheads, room sound, hallway microphone, and some extra microphones. Trigger has this limitation of 8 channels, but I still wanted to have a couple extra things, so I sampled also the kick drum with an SM7B, a very unique sound, a second kick out microphone, and my friend who brought his powerful D112. So these are the raw versions of the sample. So you have these TCIs ready to use to create any sound, and these are raw samples, meaning that you can apply your own processing, do all your own EQ, compression, saturation, treat these samples however you like. But I also wanted to include processed samples. So we have all those same microphones or microphone setups, but this time with processing. So this time much more mix ready, and you can choose to use the raw samples or the processed or mix and match, do whatever you want. There's also one shots. So one shot is just one single hit. Like I said, you can load these one-shot samples on any sampler, on any DAW. Some people prefer just to blend one-shots with their live drums, which is completely fine. And you have the raw and processed versions for all of these samples. Let's go to toms, I guess, first. It's very similar, raw versions for all of the samples. I've taken the time to sample all of the toms with 3 top microphones, 2 bottom microphones, of course overheads, room microphones, and a hallway microphone. And as always, you get also the processed versions of each mic setup. So you have completely raw toms or processed toms. You have the presets, which will load up a bunch of TCIs together if that's what you need. I would recommend starting with the presets actually, and then you can start shaping the sounds however you see fit. And of course, there's also the one shots if you prefer the sound of one shots, the workflow of one shots. I'm talking now, last but not least, about the snare, because on snare I kind of went a little bit crazy. When recording bands here in my studio, I will generally keep the kick drum and the toms on a very similar tuning across different drum recording sessions. But the snare, it's something that I feel kind of really needs to change depending on the style of the band, depending of the tempo of the songs, and many different things, you know. So I decided to sample this beautiful Ludwig Superphonic snare. It's a hammered Superphonic, and decided to sample it on 6 different tunings, you know. So it's a bit crazy and it's a lot, but for my own workflow this is necessary. So low tuning, medium low, medium tuning, medium high tuning, and a really extra high tuning, you know, because I love those like super high tuned snares. Many different microphones, like 8 setups for each tuning of the snare. 2 condenser microphones, very different sounding, a snare top dynamic microphone, a snare bottom microphone. This one is kind of like a large diaphragm condenser, which is looking directly, the capsule is looking down at the edge of the top of the snare. And this is kind of more to get you a ringy sound that you can bring, especially in the processed versions of the samples. You can bring it up and get that ring if you feel like you need some extra sustain, you know. I'm personally a very big fan of ringy snares. I understand that not every situation requires a very ringy snare, but every time that I have the opportunity, I want to bring some of that nasty mid-range with a lot of ring to give the snare more aggression, more attitude. Of course, overheads, the room sound, and the hallway. So we've got the same thing for all of the snares. Quickly preview of all of the tunings. I think that would be pretty cool, just with the main microphone, the main snare top microphone. So low tuning, medium low, medium, medium high, high, and extra high. So there's a little bit of dampening on most of the tuning. I decided to go with 0 dampening on the extra high tuning because I want that ringy sound. But yeah, the sounds are not completely dead because I typically wouldn't go for that, you know, but at the same time they are not like extremely fully open, which would be sometimes a bit uncontrolled, especially on lower tunings. So I think that I've found a nice middle ground for all of these tunings. And then for every snare on every tuning, we have the same thing but processed, you know. So I'll give you an example on perhaps the medium high tuning, which I really like. So you can see very ringy sound that you can add or decide to not use, however you see fit. Okay, and now quick preview of the different tunings, but this time the processed versions. And of course we also have one shots for processed and unprocessed versions of all of the snare tunings, as you can see here. Again, all WAV files, you can load them up on any sampler. You have the presets, which I would recommend as starting points. Okay, so that's quite a lot, but I'm very confident that you will be able to use these samples to improve your mixes, your productions, whether you want completely raw samples to use on basically any genre, or use the processed samples, which are of course made a bit more, are geared a bit more towards aggressive music genres. But yeah, you know, feel free, again, like I said, mix and match, use them however you want to. There are absolutely no rules, so I would love to hear what you guys do with this TCI sample pack. Just a quick note on processed samples. Although these are processed, you can, of course, if you decide, do some extra processing to them, adding some high mid, some high end, some extra parallel compression, saturation. Again, remember, there are absolutely no rules. So going back a little bit to the example that we had at the beginning, just to refresh your ears. So those were live drums with no samples. Okay, so let's start to talk a little bit about why would you want to use these samples. As a mixing engineer, I found myself a lot of times in a situation where people will send me these very simple recording sessions, where there's just one microphone on every drum shell, and maybe, there's like a spot mic on a hi-hat and overheads, and that's it. Meaning there's no snare bottom, there's no kick out or any other option for kick drum microphones. There's no room microphone, certainly. So this is a very important reason as to why I would want to use samples, because if I go to the kick channel, I not only have, this is one of the presets, which is called clicky, the process version. So I have two inside microphones. There's a third one and a third one and a fourth one. Both go on the porthole. These two are inside the kick drum, and these two are turned off at the moment. You can decide to turn them back up. There's a kick out microphone, and I also have the overhead sound of the kick drum. So I have independent control of the overhead sound of the kick drum, independent control of the room sound of the kick drum, independent control of the hallway microphone. So not only am I getting a replacement for the direct sound of the microphones, I'm also getting room sound and overhead sound. Compared to the completely dry sound of a live drum kick drum microphone. Which, by the way, also has the bleed. When working with samples, we don't have to worry about the bleed anymore, okay? Yeah, similar thing for snare. This is just the snare drum on its own from the live drum mics. But here, on what I have replaced, I have only one of the snare top microphones. There are three of them, so you can use whichever one you prefer or mix, the three microphones, or just use two, however you see fit. There's the snare bottom, which was not present on the original recording, so I have independent control of a snare bottom. I have this very ringy sound, which I absolutely love. Independent control of the overhead sound of just the snare, room sound, and the hallway microphone. So this is a very complete sounding snare sound. Side note, remember to put, if you're using trigger directly on audio tracks, remember to make these audio tracks stereo, otherwise you won't get the stereo sound of the overheads and the room and the hallway microphones. Now perhaps let's go and try a few other examples. I'm showcasing the sound of these processed versions of the samples. But maybe you think like, oh, this is too much for me, this is too much processing, it doesn't fit what I want to do. Then just simply go and start using some of the raw presets. So we're going to change. Let's just focus on kick and snare. Let's just go for the raw versions of the presets. Okay, medium, high, raw, okay. And there you go, you have completely raw samples. And you can start going in and applying your own processing. And you may be thinking like, what if I want to just process the kick-in microphone separately from the overhead sound of the microphone? You can just simply duplicate, okay? And on one of the tracks, you can decide to just load up. You can unload everything, or you can just turn it down, and you can just have one channel if you want to just process that individual channel. However you see fit, whatever you want to do. And on the second channel, maybe you can decide to load up perhaps just the kick out microphone and mix it in a way where you have individual control of all the channels and you can do your own mixing on any channel. So there's many options, there's many things that you can do. Don't limit yourself, just experiment and use for certain situations. I'm sure that I will personally be using the processed samples for certain situations where I want to start from scratch and develop a new drum sound. I will start most likely with the completely raw samples, and this is why I wanted to give you both options, you know. So far we've been talking mostly about replacing drums with samples, but not everything needs to be 100% replaced. We could also go into more of like a blending samples to enhance the sound type of situation. We can go to our main microphone, main kick microphone. Let me just start from scratch perhaps. Okay, let me adjust some settings on trigger, and we're going to load up, because the kick drum that we have, the live kick drum, is a kick-in microphone position. So I can decide to load up a kick-out microphone and just blend that with the mix control. And there we have a mix of the kick-in plus the sample. Although something that I would argue is even more effective, again, would be to duplicate, and we can keep the first channel with no samples. And then on this next channel, we can add perhaps the microphones that would be missing. So let me go again to one of the presets. Yeah, let's go. So let's not have any inside microphones. Let's just add a kick out. I won't have the mix this time 100%. I think we're going to turn up the detail a little bit for better detection. Okay, so we can have on one fader the real kick, and on the second one just enhance the sound. And that way, all the microphones that were missing, we've now added. You know, we have our overheads or room microphones. Keep in mind the original session had 0 room microphones, which tend to be really important for me when dialing in, when creating a drum sound. And of course, we had no kick out microphone, which now we have. We could also be loading each one of these individual TCIs on different channels for even more control. So the possibilities are just endless. So I think that's everything that I wanted to talk to you about, doing this deep dive of these samples. Don't forget to try these samples out. Link in the description. There's a free mini pack so you can get started with the TCIs. And if you like, I would recommend getting the full thing so you can have all of the TCIs, all of the one shots, all of the different tunings on the snare, and all of the microphones configurations, so you can start getting some of these juicy sounding samples and improve your mixes. That's everything that I have for you today. Keep mixing, keep making amazing music, and I'll see you around very soon, hopefully.